All right, so that's it, right? Okay, we did it. We did it, guys. That is credits. All right. First things first, we've got to update the game totals here. We have now completed 123 games in 2023 and 445 since we started doing this in 2020. I guess there's not supposed to be any volume here. I don't hear anything. Yeah, I don't hear anything. Fine. All right. That was an interesting game. Let's go over the positives first. The story is incredibly interesting. It definitely has that feel of being adapted from a book. It's got that. It's a very rich story. There's a lot to unpack, and it plays out in a way that is very measured and methodical and book-like. You know, it's not an action game. It's not a comedy. It's not and it's not even like an over-the-top horror or anything. It's very slow building and methodical story, and that was the best part of it. Certainly, was the story. It was really cool. Really, really cool story. So this is best described, I suppose, as a walking sim, similar to something like Firewatch or Fort Solace, or any of those types of games. There's no combat. You don't have an inventory to manage. There's no RPG elements. It's you just experiencing the narrative, and you do have some choices to make when it comes to dialogue and some things that do look like they affect the outcome of the story. But outside of that, it's really just walking through it or driving through it, depending. So if that's not your jam, you won't like this game. But if you're at least open to that, I think that among that kind of game, this is probably about as good as that kind of genre can get. It's really propelled by a great story, great acting, great visuals, great art direction. The characters are all interesting, and like I said, the story just kind of, it's one of those where it kind of slowly unravels and shows you more and more. So if I wanted to play another walking sim, if I was in the mood for that, I would want something similar to this, probably. As far as cons go, well, to get this one out of the way, the first half was pretty flawless, technically. The second half, I had several bugs. I had to restart even once. It's a brand new game, so that's to be expected. And none of them were, almost only one of them really required me to start over. Most of them were just like weird frame drop issues. The frames would drop out from time to time. There would be like animations would skip where it was like I'm supposed to show an animation of me climbing into something and I would just appear on the other side instead. There was some issues like that. But, you know, it wasn't that distracting. It was a mild annoyance. But what was most notable about it was that it didn't even start until the second half. It's like they were sweeping for bugs and then ran out halfway through the game. Ran out of time or something. You know, I thought that there were a lot there, especially toward the end. There was this feeling of like, it's hard for me to quantify really, but like toward the end, it started to drag a little bit, and part of the reason that it started to drag was that you are forced as the main character to do things and go places that doesn't make any sense to go. It doesn't make any sense to do these things. And so I'm finding myself saying, why are we having this long discussion about X when all we need to do is leave? You know, there were several situations like that where the story didn't quite make sense to me, and I suspect that may be because of some of the choices that I made brought me to a position that just wasn't organic within the context of the story. I don't know that for sure, but I found myself a little frustrated toward the end a few times where it was like, why are we having a 10-minute discussion? Some of the discussions just went on too long, period, in my opinion. But even beyond that, I would be thinking, why are we having a 10-minute discussion about something that we shouldn't be? Like, we shouldn't be even talking about this. So that was a little frustrating. But these are nitpicks. Overall, this game is, if you like a narrative type game where there are dialogue choices and you can get good endings and bad endings, and you can just kind of live in this world, and it almost is like reading a book, like you're just kind of living in this world for a while, then this is highly recommendable, mostly because just the story is so cool. As far as where a game like this is going to rank, it's not going to be a top 100 game because there's just this genre just, there's only so high it can go. The only narrative adventures that I really love are the ones that have choices in them that are constantly changing the story. Like something like As Dusk Falls, or any of the Dark Pictures games, right? Any of those horror games like Until Dawn or The Quarry. But let's forget about horror for a second. Let's talk about As Dusk Falls, because it's basically the same thing but without horror. In that game, you're constantly making decisions. It's constantly changing where the story is going, and you can feel the weight of your decisions, and you have a lot of really tough decisions to make. This wasn't really like that. It's more of like a Firewatch kind of game where it's like you have a few decisions to make here and there, but mostly you're just experiencing the story. There is, I believe, it seems that there is like different endings that you can get, but aside from that, you're probably not going to see like big swaths of story that you wouldn't otherwise if you make these different changes. It doesn't feel like that kind of game. It really feels like it's probably on a set path until close to the end, and then maybe it diverges at the end. That's how it feels. So I'm not going to enjoy this as much as, say, something like The Quarry or As Dusk Falls, because I like it, or Detroit Become Human, those games too. That developer makes those games too. In those games, I'm constantly feeling the weight of my decisions. I feel like the story is really being shaped by my decisions. This isn't that kind of game, and that's not bad. It's just I like those kinds of games more, and this just isn't that. This is really more of like, it's following a book, so it's not going to divert too far. You've got some decisions that will shape certain things about the story, but there were definitely times where it was like it felt like I was making a major decision, or it felt like I would like mess something up. And then it would turn out 10 minutes later. It's like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. And we're just going to keep moving on with the story. So now that has been a major complaint of mine with games like this. But that in this particular game, I can't really fault the game that much for it, because it's very clear that this is designed to be a set narrative. And it's not advertising like, the story is up to you. It doesn't feel like that kind of game. This feels like I said, like more Firewatch, where maybe there's a little bit of a difference in an ending, but that's about it. Otherwise, you're just experiencing the story. So yeah, that kind of game isn't my favorite genre, but for that kind of game, this is about as good as it gets. I didn't love Firewatch, and I wouldn't go as far as to say I loved this either, but I appreciate both of them for what they are. It's just not my favorite genre, so it's not going to rank that high. But I think it was a good game, and if you like games like Firewatch, then I would absolutely recommend this. I know there are a lot of people that they love Firewatch. If you love Firewatch, you should play this for sure. All right, that's it. Last order of business: Invincible. The Invincible. It's been fun, but we are now going to delete you from our console and never play you again. Bye. Bye. Thank you.